deeply attracted mutually, and bound especially by a shared love of Jewish mysticism, especially Kabbalah. Both of them were pre-med students at the time. They graduated, I think, about a year apart, and each went off to their respective medical studies, each becoming a physician. The J76 of the series title stands for Jackson College, 1976, reflecting a time when women students at Tufts had their own college, albeit with the same curriculum as the male undergraduates. Then, in the early 1980s, Susan's life was tragically cut short by an auto accident, leaving Alex intensely bereaved. But he went on to become immensely successful, prosperous, and accomplished in his medical practice. Eventually, he endowed in Susan's memory a health sciences facility based at Tufts. He also endowed the present lecture series, and in addition, the Susan J. Feigenbaum J76 Memorial Prize for Excellence in Judaic Studies, targeted for promising sophomores and juniors. This year's recipient is Eva Bibas, Venezuelan-born student, now in her junior year. Her family now lives in Miami. She is herself a devotee of Kabbalah, but who wrote an extraordinary, albeit not directly Kabbalistic, research paper for my Book of Genesis course, analyzing and interpreting in a feminist direction Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling painting of the Garden of Eden story, combining remarkably the story of Genesis chapters 2 and 3, both before and after the fall. Eva is herself a brilliant practicing artist with a promising career as a painter or professor of the practice, or both. And so today's event can perhaps be symbolized by the love story that stands at the center of Kabbalah, between the transcendent male divinity known as Tiferet and its exiled, itinerant feminine presence known as Shekhinah, the divine presence that inhabits Jewish exile, Jewish prayer, Jewish learning, mealtimes, Sabbaths, holidays, and acts of charity and philanthropy. And thus, Alex Doman and his dear departed Susan, though separated by mortality, still share the beautiful unity that their bond presupposes. So with that in mind, let me turn this session back to Tufts' unofficial professor of Jewish mysticism and Zohar, Rabbi Naftali Brower.
Thank you so much, Professor Rosenberg. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Professor Melila Hellner-Eshed, who is speaking from Jerusalem. Before I introduce our speaker, just a couple of housekeeping details. Melila will be sharing sources on the screen throughout her lecture. For those of you who want to download it, the content is on the link in the chat, so you can download it, save it for later, or follow along at your leisure. But those are for you to have. And what's going to happen is Melila will speak for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have Q&A, which I will moderate. And the way we're going to do the Q&A is, if you have questions, put them in the chat. The chat will only come to me. So I will read the questions, I can cluster them, and I can then discuss them with Melila. You don't have to wait until the end of the lecture. As she's talking, if thoughts come to mind, just put them in the chat. That'll make a very rich conversation. The lecture will be recorded. I think that's it for housekeeping. So now to our lecturer. So Professor Melila Hellner-Eshed is a senior research fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, and she teaches Jewish mysticism and Zohar at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And her publications include A River Flows from Eden, The Language of Mystical Experience in the Zohar, which was published in English by Stanford University Press in 2009. And another book, which I'm really excited to say will be out soon in English, also from Stanford University Press. I've been nagging Melila for a while about this, but now it's available in Hebrew, and it's called Seekers of the Face, From the Secrets of the Idra Rabba in the Zohar, which will inform some of our discussion today. Melila is an extraordinary scholar of Zohar and Jewish mysticism. I think she is one of the most sensitive readers of these really complex mythological literary masterpieces that are Kabbalistic texts. And what I find so compelling about Melila, which gives me so much excitement and pleasure to share her with a wider audience here at Tufts and beyond, is that Melila occupies the academy, but also real lived experience. And that probably explains why she's very popular as a lecturer in Jewish communities and synagogues and JCCs, in addition to her university work. Melila brings the secrets of Kabbalah and Zohar into lived experience. And particularly today's topic, which we discussed, which I'm really excited to be presenting, is the face of God in a year in which so many human faces have been concealed. And when we do see each other's faces, we're only seeing them in two dimensions. I think there's so much here to unpack. And then finally, on a personal note of gratitude, I consider Melila to be my teacher, my friend, and it gives me great honor to invite you to speak here at Tufts today. So without further ado, Melila.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and I am delighted to see your faces. We're going to be talking about faces and about the experience of face to face and the gaze. So it's so much nicer if I can see semi-real faces on those rectangles. I'm honored to be the speaker at the Susan Feigenbaum annual lecture this year, and really I want to thank you, Naftali, for inviting me. I am speaking from my home in Jerusalem. It's very, very, very hot today in Jerusalem. And I want to say that the masks that we've all been wearing for the past year or so are off, right? And some people, the mask that we wore in public spaces. And it's very interesting to watch the different experiences of people. Some people really feel exposed. They're like strangely exposed when their masks are off now, and they speak about it very openly in a very interesting way. And others really celebrate just the possibility of being face to face with their fellow human beings, and it's very fascinating. So I was thinking that choosing this theme that we're going to be talking about, that the whole theme of faces and the gaze between faces and the infinite intricacies found in the faces that we look into have all taken such a different meaning this year, I think, as Naftali was just saying. Like, the pandemic suddenly just took away, for many of us, the natural daily encounter with living faces, right? Of people, of our colleagues, of people on the street. It's like taken away. And the three-dimensional sensuous encounter with real faces was replaced by another very facially intense, experience, which is the Zoom. And like in those little rectangles, right, on our screens, we find ourselves gazing at faces suddenly devoid of a body and a shared existence in space. I feel that we've really come to cherish the experience of being face to face again. I hope that for all of you soon on the other side of the ocean. So let me begin. I want you to join me on a 40 or so minute journey into the variegated and fascinating meaning of the biblical term panim befanim, or panim el panim, meaning face to face. Panim in Hebrew is face, panim befanim is face to face. And to look at the way this term has gained different meanings throughout the ages, and especially to look at the healing aspects that Jewish mysticism has found in the experience of a loving face-to-face encounter. Okay, so just enjoy it. You can feel your faces as as I'm talking. You can kind of get into different parts of it, and I want to start. I mean, the way I'm going to do it, I want to speak a bit about Tanakh, about the biblical use of the term, and then I want to move into something in rabbinics, okay, in rabbinics, and then we're going to jump into, my main world, which is the world of Jewish mysticism, and it's going to be 13th and 16th century. So let's begin with the beginning, which is how do we find this term panim b'panim in the Bible, in Tanakh? And it's very clear, before I even continue, that it evokes closeness and intimacy devoid of barriers or filters, right? I think I can say that, right? Panim b'panim, to be face to face with someone, is to have that unmediated experience, okay? And it has to do with some kind of closeness. So the first place that we find it in Tanakh is in describing the level of intimacy in the relationship between Moshe, Isha Elohim, the man of God, Isha Elohim, and God. And we find, I'm not sharing now because these are just, one sentences. I'll share soon. And besides, it's more fun looking at your faces. So we find in Exodus, we find the verse, God would speak to Moses, panim befanim, face to face, as a person speaks lere'ehu, to a friend or to a beloved friend. We also recall, if we're already saying that intimate relationship between Moshe and God causes Moshe's face to glow, right? To glow, to radiate in a way that is so intense that he needs to kind of wear a veil, right, over his face. But it's an amazing statement to say that there was a person called Moshe, and he speaks with God panim befanim, as a person speaks with his beloved friend. But it's not only Moses who's privy to this state of gazing face to face with God. In the book of Deuteronomy, in Dvarim, in describing the collective experience of revelation at Sinai, Moses reminds, right? All the book of Deuteronomy is like retelling of our story, the collective story. And Moses reminds the children of Israel that during the covenant in Sinai, and I'm quoting, face to face, God spoke to you on the mountain out of the fire. Okay, so there was that moment out and beyond regular consciousness, and it was collective, okay? In some way, it's retained in the collective memory of the people, of having a face-to-face encounter with God. By the way, the rabbis discuss whether that collective moment of seeing God took place at Mount Sinai, or was it actually at its most intense experience of closeness happening in the event of crossing the sea, kind of the birth canal to be crossed, to be born as a free nation. So that's also an incredible idea, that the moment of seeing fully, like in an unmediated way, seeing the face of God, could have happened as everyone is crossing the sea of reeds, Yam Suf. So I just want to pause here for a moment and say, okay, so what does the term imply? What does it awaken in our imagination when we're thinking of these two events in biblical events? The first one is the most immediate understanding that God has a face. Okay, God has a face, and that God and human beings can actually find themselves in the gaze of facing each other. Now in Tanakh, we also find verses that stand in very high tension with the verses that I've just read, and maybe you know some of them. And those are the verses according to which God warns that no person can see me and live, right? Lo yir'eni ha'adam v'chai. Yeah, that a human being of flesh and blood cannot actually איך אומרים, survive the intense encounter with the face of God. But I wanna kind of remind us that statements like these never imply that God doesn't have a face, but rather that there's a question of, are human beings allowed to see that face, or can human beings withstand the experience of that intense experience of seeing God? But yet, I think these three verses on Moshe and the verse about the people in Sinai or on the ocean or on the sea, and even the one about being able or not being able to see God, that they all convey the idea that in certain moments of revelation that rupture ordinary consciousness, and in the prophetic state of mind, this mutual gaze becomes possible, even if only for fleeting moments. Okay, so I wanted to start there and maybe end what I want to say about God's face in quoting a very wonderful kind of, the great priestly benediction, the priestly blessing. And I think in it, we find in a very poetic way this quest of having God's countenance and face shine to us. And I think this priestly blessing, which we still say today in Jewish homes, right, on Friday nights and in congregations, is really to experience the loving gaze of the divine, a gaze that relinquishes anger and is full of forgiveness and conveys the blessing of shalom. And I just want to quote it. It says, "May God bless you and protect you. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God make his face shine upon you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha, and be gracious to you. V'yichuneka. May God lift up his countenance to you and grant you peace. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom." So just look, this blessing, which is so kind of neatly packaged in these four small kind of lines, are really about the face of God, the desire to live in that, to experience kind of the radiance of that face, the forgiveness of that face. So God's face is light and life in that blessing. Let us not forget that God's face can be, in the biblical world, wrathful and lethal, right? It can be dangerously angry also. But when we do the blessing of the Kohanim, of the when we read and recite it, it's really about the wish to encounter God's countenance as nourishment for our lives. So that's what I wanted to bring from the biblical stuff, and I want to jump into rabbinics, into the world of the sages, kind of the rabbinic period spanning the 2nd century BCE to the 5th century to the Common Era. And I want to say that in the Talmud, the term face to face is carried in mythic memory into the Holy of Holies, the holiest innermost chamber of the tabernacle and the temple, in which two cherubs stood on the Ark of the Covenant. And according to rabbinic tradition, one cherub was male and one cherub was female. And when the Israelites fulfilled the will of God, the divine will, the cherubs would turn face to face and be, kind of stand there towards each other in a loving sexual embrace. And on the other hand, when Israel alienated themselves from fulfilling the divine will, the male and female would turn away, right? They would miraculously turn away from each other. Um, and that's how we would know, like, where are we in relationship to God, okay? And that appears in Baba Batra in the Babylonian Talmud, in the tractate of Baba Batra, 99a. And the state of the cherubs, of the kruvim, in the state of face to face with each other, was conveyed to the pilgrims coming to the first temple by the priests who would lift the parochet, right? They would unravel or move the parochet, the curtain which separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple. And let me just read the way it's described in the tractate of Yoma, the tractate that deals with Yom Kippur. And it says the following: when Israel ascended to Jerusalem for the festival, and I think here it means also for all the festivals, the three festivals in which people did pilgrimage to be seen by God, okay, leraot, to be seen by God, the curtain would be rolled open for them, and the keruvim were revealed with their bodies intertwined. They, the people, would be addressed by the priests saying, look, God's love for you resembles the love of male and female. Nachon, it's kind of amazing. I remember the first time I read it, I said, can't be that this is written here, but lo and behold, it is. You know, that's one of the fun things of studying. You say, oh, this is what it says. So it is very fascinating that the term face to face in these rabbinic traditions really bring together the sacred, the intimate, and the erotic. Okay? Face to face is suddenly not just between the human and the divine, it's actually they're the ones who bring it as a encounter between the face of the masculine and the face of these feminine, kind of small, angelic kruvim. So, okay, now we're going to jump 1,000 years. We're going to do fast forward. And I want to jump about almost 1,000 years to the world of Jewish mysticism and especially to Zohar. Now, I don't know really who are the people that I'm speaking to. I wish I did, and I wish I was there in person, but I can just say that the Zohar really is the dazzling diamond in the crown of Jewish mystical medieval writing. It's an incredible piece of Jewish thought, imagination, poetry, myth, mysticism, and it's been like really a great and transformative treasure in my personal life. And I've had the great privilege of learning with great teachers here in the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And I've had the honor of teaching wonderful students and also of writing a lot about the Zohar. By the way, the Stanford book on the faces, on the Idra, is going to come out, I think, in a month and a half. I just received today the final, the galley proofs. And during this year of the Corona, under the auspices of the Corona Fairy, me and my dear friend Omri Shasha wrote a big introduction to the Zohar book, which is going to be wonderful. And I hope it will be translated. I think we're already starting the translation this week into English. And it's really going to be, no footnotes. It's going to be an introduction. It's going to be chock full of paragraphs from the Zohar. Many people here love the Zohar. They have no idea how to access it because it's so dense and the Aramaic is so frightening. So we decided it's time to write a big, new, wonderful, loving introduction to the Zohar, following the great introductions that existed before us. Um, so that's what I just want to say. I'm not going to give you now a big, full introduction to the Zohar, but really the Zohar is a great um, compendium of Kabbalistic homilies and midrashim on the Bible, on the books, on all the books of the Torah, and also of the Megillot, of the scrolls. But maybe more importantly, the Zohar has within it, kind of almost on every page, we have like this mystical wild epic of a group of companions, the Chavraya, that live their life around their beloved teacher, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is the crowned hero of this literature. There's about 400 stories in the Zohar, and I think I totally fell in love with these stories. And they kind of allow you to just jump in to that fantastic, imaginative, imaginative world. So you have Naftali, who loves the Zohar. That's always the best thing. You just have to have teachers that love the Zohar. I'm crazy about the Zohar, so I can just go on. But I think what's amazing about it, and maybe here I'll quote something. I mean, not verbatim, but Joel Rosenberg was saying that he translates Zeitlin, but Zeitlin, who was a great lover of the Zohar in the first half of the 20th century, was murdered by the Nazis as an old man already after he was in the Warsaw Ghetto. But he wrote the first kind of introduction to the Zohar and translated the first 18 pages of the Zohar. And he really says, there has never been a book that deals with every corner in human existence, right? The shadow, the darkness, the joy, the sexual, the sublime, right? The weird, everything finds its place in this literature. And I think that's why it gained, an acceptance that is you cannot compare it to anything, right? That it became, within 200 years of its appearance, it became a sacred and authoritative book. So I want to take us into a few moments in the Zohar that take the turn face to face to a new place. So I want to start with the whole myth of the splitting apart of the primordial androgyne. Okay, so in describing the creation of first Adam and following earlier rabbinic traditions, Adam is described as first appearing as a conjoined androgynous being with male and female halves conjoined back to back. Okay, achol bechol, back to back, or side to side, depending on which. And in the Zohar, there's a wonderful question asked, which is, why did they not stay in that state? Why do we say that it is not good for a human being to be alone? Here they are in this very special unity. They're actually part of one body. And the Zohar answers its question by saying that the state of being back to back does not allow a face-to-face encounter. And a body and to body coupling that would allow the male and female to be fruitful and to multiply. And therefore, God separated the two conjoined bodies, beings, right, and allowing them to come back together as individuated persons. And I feel that the deep insight in the direction that the Zohar takes the myth of the androgyne is that the androgynous state has in it a type of wholeness. It does have a type of wholeness, yet it does not allow for recognition, individuation, and relationship. Okay, and relationship. And for that, there needs to be a separation and a coming face to face. So the state of face to face is seen as a blessed one filled with mutual pleasure and kind of balancing out the world. So that's take one that I want to kind of throw in as a very important image of the Zohar of face to face. The second direction I want to take us in is from another part of the Zohar, where we find the term panim befanim describing what I would say is the highest level of connectedness between one who learns Torah and the Torah, okay? The relationship between a human being and the Torah herself. In a very, very famous parable, this relationship is imagined as a passionate, romantic courting game that gains step by step higher and higher levels of emotion and intimacy. I don't know if you've studied it. If you haven't studied it, I hope you do. But I think it's time that I share something, so I'll share this. Okay, so just bear with me. Here we go. And I just want to look at that. Okay. Do you see it? Is everything okay? Everybody sees? Yofi. So I want to read this parable. It says, come and see. This is the way of Torah. At first, when she begins to reveal herself to a person, she beckons him momentarily with a hint. If he perceives, good. If not, she sends for him, calling him simple. And she says, tell that simple one to come closer so I can talk with him. As it is written, whoever is simple, right, or seductible, I think is a better translation for petty, no question. Let him turn in here, he who lacks understanding. As he approaches, she is the Torah, she begins to speak with him from behind a curtain she has drawn, words suitable for him, until he reflects little by little. This is drasha. Drasha is a form of Jewish hermeneutics and commentary. And then she converses with him from behind a delicate sheet, words of riddle, right? A more kind of interactive relationship. Riddles, right? You ask, the student has to answer. And this is called Haggadah or Agadah. Once he has grown accustomed to her, she reveals herself to him face to face and tells him all her hidden secrets and all the hidden ways concealed in her heart since primordial days. So let me just stop. I'll stop the share for a moment. And I want to say that in this very, very amazing parable, the state of face to face with the Torah describes a feeling of deep familiarity, unity, I would say, love, a state of intermingling, where the lover of Torah and Torah herself are described in this kind of mutual revelatory state. This is a state of high inspiration, where innovative artistic interpretation can spring forth naturally. Okay, so the Torah in this parable is not imagined as a text or merely an object, but rather as a subject as well as a divine feminine personality, and the relationship with her is a relationship of passion and love. And this parable kind of changed the color of the air for just understanding that the paradigm of thinking of Torah not as a commandment of something you have to do, or the Torah as a text that you just have to decipher once and for all, but suddenly understanding that it's a never-ending love affair between us, the lovers of Torah and Torah, is amazing, and also kind of putting it in this amorous setting of Spanish kind of romantic courting is quite amazing. I hope everybody's following. I hope so. I want to turn now to another part of the Zohar. That's the one that this recent book is about. And it's a whole strata in the Zohar, and it's called the Idrot. The Idrot conveys stories of convention. Idra means a convention or assembly, and it's about the gatherings of the mystics who make up the circle of the companions in the Zohar. And this Jewish Fellowship of the Ring, the Chevraya, are the Zohar's main protagonists. And they, as I said, live their life around their master, the great master of Torah, the great shaman, the great mystical hero, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And in the stories of these gatherings, divinity is not depicted in the language of divine qualities or sefirot. I hope that you've gotten some kind of introduction or introductory definition to sefirot, which is the way divinity is described in most parts of the Zohar, meaning that God is spoken about in this beautiful language of qualities. But the qualities are abstract, right? Wisdom, beauty, splendor, judgment. I mean, these are the names of these divine kind of active categories. But the Idras rather speak about God in three distinct aspects, faces, right? Described as faces, panim or partsufim. So I'll give her just the short version of it, but I say I want to say, what? You know, this is what Jews do. They get together in mystical conventions and describe three faces of God. Like, what's going on here? Like, how are we supposed to take this in a certain way? So, like, why faces? And what's in a face? And I think that in comparison to the abstract qualities as wisdom or intelligence of the Sfirot, a face is really an integral, holistic unity. Just think of your face. Okay, just think of your face. Think of any face you know. Each one carrying millions of minute changes of color, texture, expression, temperature, temperament, landscapes of emotion, right, that go through our faces, sensations, communication. So the first of these faces is the white face of divinity that's called the Ancient of Days, or the one with the great face, or the patient one, the one of extended breath, Arich Anpin. This is the face of God as the source of all. It's God as oneness, okay? It's radiating unconditional love, forgiveness, patience, and life. And the second partsuf, the second face invoked in the assembly of the Idra, is the face of God in the realm of duality. Okay, you have to think of everything that you've ever learned about oneness and duality in any kind of religion or any kind of mysticism. And it is depicted in the Zohar very powerfully as a face of a young warrior, a young, beautiful warrior, or kind of the face of the beloved in the Song of Songs. His head crowned with the black curls, right, of the beloved in the Song of Songs. And he's called the small face, okay? The small face, or the short breathed one, or the one of short temper. And this is God as we experience God in this world. Okay, this is God as our dualistic consciousness can conceive God, and this face is called Zeir Anpin. And the third face, kind of invoked in the Zohar, is the face of divinity as feminine, with her multicolored head of hair. Okay. Now, the Idra is an emergency gathering of the companions who are summoned for the urgent mystical task of aligning these faces with one another. The first part of the assembly invokes and relates the experience of the alignment of Zeir Anpin, who is overburdened and contracted with impatience and wrath in reaction to human conduct in our world, right? And the whole kind of mystical process of the Idra is aligning that contracted, tired face with the face of Arichanpin, with the face of the ancient face of God as oneness. And when that gaze takes place, okay, it allows the face of Zeranpin to relax, to soften, to expand. With all the tension and anger bathed in the white, radiant flow coming from the eyes of the Ancient of Days. And then all anger is washed away and Zeranpin is filled with compassion. Okay? So that's an amazing description. It's resting on that. That's what the companions, the mystics, kind of invoke and create in the first part of the Idra. Naftali, I have like 10 minutes. Is that okay? 10? Okay.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. No, I just need to know like where we are. Okay.
And actually allows me just to remind everyone, if there's stuff that you want to bring up in conversation, put it in the chat. Thanks.
Now, the second part of the Idra, of this assembly, describes the body of the feminine and masculine divine. Okay, divinity manifests in two bodies that appear in the same way as the human beings on earth. They appear first in the androgynous state, and then they are taken apart and come face to face with each other. And the moment of that face-to-face, okay, so we're talking about two great and very important face-to-face experiences that are depicted in the Idra, which are understood already inside the Zohar literature as being the holy of holies of the Zohar. Okay, these summit meetings of the conventions of the mystics are seen as the top, kind of as the most kind of amazing revelatory parts of the Zohar. I love them, and I spent 10 years writing about the Idra, and it was very difficult to come out of that because it was so amazing to kind of be there. But I want to take a moment and look at the differences between these two kinds of gazes, or of gaze. I don't even know how you say that correctly in English. Now, while both gazes are filled with love and eros, the first one evokes the gaze, the one of Zeranpin looking into the white, radiant face of Arichanpin. It evokes the gaze of a baby and its mother. Okay, a gaze that so many psychoanalysts have defined as the grounds for a healthy development of an individuated personality. Okay, it's the gaze that conveys without any words that everything's going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. Right? It's the gaze that holds, it's held, it holds the baby in a kind of safe place. I think this gaze also evokes the experience of a disciple gazing lovingly into the face of his or her master, okay, his or her teacher. It is mutual, but it's not equal. It's not an egalitarian gaze. The baby to the mother, the disciple to the master, or also the gaze of a young person gazing into the face of a beloved or respected elder. I think that's kind of, wow, you have to kind of go into that imagination. It's being kind of relieved, kind of just softened and relaxed by just being in that gaze. The second set of aligned faces are those of the masculine and feminine, where the gaze is mutual, loving, and very sexually arousing. That's what they speak about, because the face-to-face is also a way of speaking about the two bodies coming together in sexual intercourse. The type of face-to-face encounter, both in divinity and in humanity, of masculine and feminine, is understood as the completion that comes about from the bringing together of opposites. Okay, the male is not female, the female is not the male, and the celebration is the ability of bringing these two entities together into a wholeness. So the coming together kind of in the Zoharic description renders both the face of the masculine and feminine, it renders them luminous, sapphire-like, and filled with desire. It brings about pleasure, joy, and the flow of divine plenty into the world. Now, that's quite an amazing description of what can happen in that communication of face to face. So, since we have just very few minutes, I just want to say that this auspicious and blessed mutual gaze of the masculine and feminine depicts a harmonious state of affairs between the masculine and feminine, like the cherubs when they're connected to each other. But the Zohar, again and again, is aware of the fact that in our reality, both human reality and in their understanding also in divine reality, that is not the normal state of affair. The state that needs healing and rectification is the fact that most of the time the male turns away his face from the female, turns his face away from that encounter. And that brings about alienation, distancing, and everything that is very problematic in our world. So the role of the mystics is Leshem Yichud Kuchabrich Ushchinte. The role is to bring together the masculine and feminine back into a state of face to face. And this is not only about divine faces. The companions themselves are encouraged by their teacher Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai to face each other in a loving relationship as a companionship. Okay, they need to be in that state of the cherubs. They need to be in that state of face to face. So I wanna just bring something. I don't think I need to share it. I'll share just the last text. But I want to say that I want to jump into the 16th century, 200 years after the Zohar appears, and to say that I found a beautiful, beautiful description of a Kabbalist called David Ben Zimra, who lived in Egypt in the first half of the 16th century. And I wrote my master's about this guy. And he describes the gaze of a student into the face of a beloved teacher. I love teaching this on Lag BaOmer, which is Rabbi Shimon's day in Israel. And it's a big, event. And he says the following: when we turn to gaze upon one in whom our minds find ease, our souls are aroused to complete intention, our minds expand, and our hearts rejoice. Then God's Spirit rests upon us as if speaking prophecy. Further, we learn from teachers of wisdom, and by the way, when he says that, he means the Sufi Muslim mystics of that area that he lives in Egypt, which is so fascinating. And he says, I have learned from them that when we direct our attention to our teacher and give him or her our hearts, our souls will be bound together, and his or her fullness will overflow to us, and we will receive an extra soul. This is called the mystery of a new soul pregnancy, an ibur, for both teacher and student. And this is as scripture says, your eyes will see your teachers. For when one gazes at those one loves, or to those one feels close to, or to their teacher or to one with whom they feel affinity, the soul will awaken and the spirit will be added to them from above. In the 16th century, Kabbalah developed also in Tzfat, right? There's a whole school of Kabbalah that developed in the land of Israel in Tzfat. And we find there an invitation within the mystical fellowships that kind of sprouted in Tzfat, the idea that when they want to study together, they're seated in a circle, which allows them to face each other face to face, so that each one carries within themselves the soul of their companions, radiated and reflected in their faces. Okay? So in order to do that, you can't do it in a frontal lecture with rows, students sitting in rows. If you want to do mystical studies, they would sit on the floor in a circle or a semicircle, where the basic prerequisite is our ability to look into each other's face. Both David Ben Zimra and Cordovero, who speaks about this, are inspired by a beautiful, beautiful Zohar story that shall bring our journey to its end, I think. And this is one of the stories of walking on the way, which is the main way that Zohar stories are told. It's being on the path, which is so central to the Zohar's imagination and to spiritual, mystical paths in almost all religions. The story is really about the way in which we can draw the Shekhinah, the feminine aspect of the divine, to dwell with us, which is the central goal of the Zohar, I would say. And the Zohar, built on rabbinic language, it takes it into a different perspective. So let me just share again. It's our kind of final text. Okay. Here we go. It's really beautiful. Rabbi Yosei, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Chia were traveling on the road, and Rabbi Elazar met them. As soon as they saw him, they all dismounted from their donkeys. Rabbi Elazar said, "Surely I have seen the face of Shekhinah. For when one sees the righteous or virtuous of the generation and meets them, they are surely the face of Shekhinah." Why are they called the face of the Shekhinah? Because Shekhinah is hidden within them. Wow. She is in concealment and they are revealed, right? This is our faces. For those close to the Shekhinah are called her face. Now, since you are here, surely Shekhinah is arrayed upon you, and you are her face. So bringing us back from kind of this mystery tour through the ages and pages of Jewish spiritual imagination to our own day and age and, here and now moments, we can really cherish all the more the mutual nourishment, healing, connection in encountering each other's faces. And oh, what a wonderful invitation to seek the divine in the faces we encounter on our path of life. So I want to end the kind of frontal part of our talk here, and see if there's any questions that I can try to answer. And thank you.
Thank you, Melila. Thank you so much for that wonderful journey from the Bible through the rabbinic period all the way to the 16th century, picking up on this beautiful, enchanting, and I think sometimes frightening idea of the face. So we have one question, which actually just popped in, but as you were talking, I was thinking, and it sits with this thought that I had, which is, you spoke a lot about the beauty of the face-to-face encounter, the intimacy of the face-to-face encounter, the reason that the first human has to be separated to turn and face the other. But looking at someone's face is an intense experience as well. You cannot be indifferent to a face, right? And there's certain expectations that you can't know in advance. Like, is the face going to look at me with joy, judgment, disappointment, respect, right? I think it takes a lot of courage sometimes to look at someone face to face. And so one of the questions we have is, how do we bring this beautiful imagery specifically here to Tufts, where if we're willing to take the risks needed to be seen and heard by others, can the Zohar enlighten us on how we can feel safety when we feel exposed or vulnerable in our face-to-face encounters with others?
First of all, I think it's kind of a wonderful invitation. I don't think it's a question for a real answer, but I think it's just the question that we have anytime we study kind of these texts, which is, in what way can they inspire? Is there a way in which they inspire us? Because I have to say that, when I study these texts, I think the thing I'm most aware of is that I do not come to these texts demanding of them to be aligned with my current political thought, the party that I vote for, the latest theory that I kind of enjoy playing with. I really, really take the journey to be on the path to go and visit this world of the medieval mystics. I'm not a medieval person. I'm a postmodern person in many ways, right? Maybe I'm a modern and postmodern, but what I feel is incredibly, as an incredible invitation, is first of all to think of a face as something that is sacred. um, I don't think I don't think we have that. I don't think I don't think that when we receive each other's face, right? Kabbalat panim. That's a whole idea that we have already in rabbinics, that the ability to joyfully receive the face of our fellow person as a moment of the indwelling of the divine is an amazing statement. I mean, it can take us all to think about Levinas, but I don't think it's in that direction. It's not just in the ethical abstract direction. It's in the beauty of intimacy. It's in the beauty of the fact that, Shekhinah is the faces of all of us put together, right? The human faces all together must be the changing face of the Shekhinah. Now, it's true. And the Zohar will say, especially when they speak of Zer and Pin in the Idrot, of this kind of God in the realm of duality, they say, sometimes you don't even want to open your eyes because you're so afraid. What are you going to find? Are you going to find a wrathful face facing you? Wouldn't you rather just God stay asleep or something? Because it's so frightening to gaze into a face of a person who is angry, very angry with you, right? So I think the face can be hell and it can be heaven, right? But the invitation to explore face, I think that's just so beautiful. It's so not abstract. It's like saying, no, it's not about let's go and become more and more abstract and we'll talk about, no, the Zohar doesn't like that. The Zohar says, no, let's bring something back to the most intense human experience that begins when we're babies suckling at our mother's breast. Okay? It's faces. And that's also, part and parcel of the religious experience and part of the mystical experience. So, uh, you know, so the question of how to make it safe, or in what way can we do it, of course, needs to, I don't live in America, we have our problems here in the Middle East, but they're different than your problems in North America. But I think it invites us to think courageously about what does it mean to allow myself to be, and to radiate, and to say what it has to say, both in words and in expression. And it's something that we long for in this year.
Yeah.
I think Zoom is very interesting, but it doesn't allow that. It doesn't allow that in many ways. And there's a beautiful Israeli poem that says, "Panim el mul panim, ulai rak pam b'chaim," face to face. Maybe we get it like once in a lifetime.
Hmm.
And I think that the reason, to say it, ulai rak pam b'chaim, maybe we can get that experience, is because it's almost messianic, or I would say it's like a moment of salvation when somebody really sees me,
Mhm.
when somebody looks into my face and really sees me, and I really see them. Those are amazing moments. It's not that they happen all the time. That the pnim, in Hebrew, panim means the face, and the pnim is the inside.
So did you just?
Inside is allowed to radiate through our face.
So on that point, I wonder, as you were talking, I came to mind the late British philosopher Roger Scruton wrote a book called The Face of God, and he says that you never look at a human face, you can only look into a face, right? And I wonder whether, when you're talking about the sacredness, there's something infinite about a human face, because I can look at a tree and I see it. Or I can reduce it. I can look at the back of a person and I see a person. But it's, even if I can read your feelings, I can't read all your feelings. There's like a depth, there's a mystery. There's something infinite about looking into the face of the other that I can never fully own or possess.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And I
Right.
think they want to leave, and I feel that the Jewish mystics want to retain that mystery on the one hand, that each one has that. We can't take, but for example, the text that I was telling us about from Cordovero in the 16th century in Sfat, he says that actually in a fellowship of mystics or students that want to study Kabbalah, he says there's different aspects of what does it mean when we're sitting in a circle facing each other. And I suppose many of you, if you've been in circles, many of us are too embarrassed. We don't even know how to kind of stay stable looking at each other's faces. That's why there's that aspect of people feeling suddenly revealed, like suddenly it's like almost nakedness, that they're full face with all this. But it's very interesting that he says that we partake in that person's life when we are looking into their faces, because there is the part in which we take in the gaze of the person looking at us, and there's the part of me looking at you. So it creates what they're really looking for, which is a very ethical sense that we are one together, that my face is in your face, right? And other texts, which are also, I think, are very Sufi in their kind of temperament, they speak about the need to make your face like a mirror, right? Rabbi Nachman writes about it a lot, that when your friend, your beloved friend, looks into your face, they actually see their own face mirrored in the fact that I have cleansed my face enough that you can see your face in my face, right? And that allows another whole level of closeness and connectedness. But I think they want that because they want to create that sense of solidarity, of web, of togetherness, and of turning from that state of alienation of achor be'achor, of back to back, into the one of face to face.
So I wonder then again, I appreciate your point about not reducing this to a toolkit for 21st century campus living. And I respect that. But I wonder whether, back to that original question, we're not doing enough looking into the face of the other, both in terms of we wear these outward labels like armor, but we're not actually seeing the depths, and we're not seeing ourselves reflected in the face of the other. And
Yeah,
there's more of that.
yeah.
I'm also thinking of, like Picasso's Cubism, like he never paints a face. There's so much face. There's so many different perspectives and feelings that go into.
Right.
Right.
Right, but I think that's why they chose it as the ultimate symbol of like infinite change, life, flow, emotion is face. You just say, I mean, think of it. They haven't yet figured out a way to kind of, right, even in the digit, even at the place where technology is to catch everything that happens at any moment in our faces. And Bemet, I feel that the idea, which is very stark and very anthropomorphic, that the Idra speak about, which is the daring to be there facing the face of God as a living face, right? It says, do not turn this into a molten image. This is not a mask. It's not an idol. It's a lived experience. Like, you have to have the experience. It's very powerful. It's very open. It's very living. Um, yeah. And I think that it's not part of our current culture. I think we're heavily garbed, guarded, protected, masked, um, by all kinds of things, by fear, by lack of intimacy, by by maybe even certain theories and ideologies that we carry with us. But the possibility of being more vulnerable and open, I think, is a deep quest that many of us carry. We carry in our hearts throughout our lives to have that ability of being panim bifanim, to be in that state.
We've got a question. I hope I understand it, but can you talk a little bit? You mentioned ethics, so going from the seeing the other to a lived ethics. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I can expand on that. The Zohar isn't written as it's the compendium of everything, right? It's everything. It's the whole world, but it doesn't organize itself in a linear fashion as you find in Jewish ethical writings. So generally, it has to be drawn out of the homilies and the stories and and the way the Zohar writes itself into being. What is very, very interesting is that during the 16th century, I think there's a merging of horizons of both the Zoharic kind of mystical world and the more kind of pious, devout, very ethically Jewish Sufi kind of direction, coming from Egypt a lot, and then coming from the Ottoman Empire into Tzfat. And in the merging of those horizons is the birth, really, of a whole genre called ethical Kabbalistic writing, right? Sifrut Musar, right? This is like Davidash, like Cordovero, like Tomer Dvorah. There's many, many, many. It's a whole kind of literary movement of trying to understand in what way can we draw the amazing insights that the Zoharic world kind of touches upon, and how can we translate them into human conduct? How can we bring them into our life? It's so sublime and huge. So a lot of it is about how can we do that, of kind of turning it into something much more minute and then accessible, so that if I'm speaking of divinity as patience, how do I cultivate patience in my face? How do I cultivate patience in my heart? in the way that I am in relationship with others? How do I cultivate forgiveness that is found in that face of God and the Idra? How can I make that a part of my life? So mystical ethical writing became, the fashion of the day in a certain way in the 16th century. And yeah, much to be explored, by the way. A lovely guy called Robert Koch wrote in English. He wrote a beautiful book about, he did his doctorate on mystical ethics. And it's very interesting.
And then I think we've got time for one more. So just pulling, you mentioned at the very beginning, we're seeing each other as pixels on a screen. We can filter the screen, we can shut it off. We haven't really, even I think when you're on Zoom, there isn't a panim el panim, there isn't face-to-face. So how do we recalibrate? Like, or is there something we learn from this absence of face as we hopefully go into a period of unmasked face-to-face encounters?
But Naftali, what's the question really? What are you asking? I mean, is it asking, or are you remarking? Like, what would you like?
I think it's more what does that mean? What does it mean to re-enter a non-virtual world? Yeah. I mean, maybe it's all of the above. It's that this gives us pause to appreciate what the face is.
Yeah. I think it's really about appreciating. I feel that what I got from, like, just even assembling all these materials together is just, it's huge, to think how Jewish interpretations throughout the ages, they just carry this idea of face, from the experience of humanity and God, the cherubs, the erotic, the sexual, the open, the baby, the mother, the old person. It's like, it's just kind of opening the vista, right? Expanding the vista, kind of opening a panoramic view. It's not like making a mailich. It's not like making a statement. It's just allowing us to expand the way we see it, and by that we become more sensitive. Just by having these images now in our inner kind of picture album, right? And I think it is important that when we re-enter the real faces, it's to appreciate that, it's to celebrate that, it's an amazing occurrence. And God knows when we have to cover up ourselves again. So I bless you all to enjoy every moment of that.
I appreciate that. There's one more question from my colleague, Professor Joel Rosenberg. I wonder whether you want to just unmute yourself.
Yeah, Joel, why don't you just ask?
So I'm coming at this question as a biblical scholar who also every Shabbat reads a little bit of Zohar, both in Aramaic and in English. And I'm stuck on two biblical passages in particular. One is the last few verses of Genesis chapter 2, in which man and woman are brought face to face for the first time after the androgyne has been separated. And Adam says, Zotapam
עצם מעצמי ובשר
מבשרי,
לזאת יקרא אישה.
Because from man this one was taken. I see them at that moment as perfectly twin-like. They each have a name that is essentially the male and female of the same species, just like all of the animals were being named species by species. Sus, Susa, Kelev, Kalba, and so forth. And Ish and Isha become thoroughly equal, it's as you say, male and female in complete harmony. Of course, the rest of the story, chapter 3, will bring us into the realm of Zeir Anpin, the constricted face and the alienation and all of that. I just wanted to comment on that, and then secondly, I wanted to go to the other passage that has long been in my head, which is Exodus chapter 33, where Moshe Rabbeinu is the anguished seeker. You know, he first of all, his position as leader of Israel is hinging on it, and he wants to know, "Hareini na et kodecha," show me now your glory, which I assume means let me see your face.
Let me see your face.
But then God says, "Lo yavani adam v'chai," I'll put you in the cleft of the rock and pass my hand over you, and you shall see me from behind, but my face will not be seen. Panai lo vera'u.
Yeah.
You know, I've always wondered what that means. I had a friend, a colleague once who interpreted that to mean, you will see as I see things. You will see me. You will see the world through divine eyes.
Well, there's all kinds of interpretations.
Yeah. So please
to
take
that.
that.
Yeah. What I want to say is that one of the interesting things about that chapter is that it says, "You shall not see my face," which first of all means that God has a face, right?
Yes.
Which is very interesting. Like a lot of people, because we're so post Maimonidean, you know, and we're kind of you know, and post Wissenschaft, like we think that abstracting is higher than
Yeah.
experiencing in a plastic or in a kind of form like. But the Torah is not like that. But it does seem that kind of a full encounter of divinity is too much. It's just too much, right? There has to be some, you know, there has to be moments of filtering, and the Zohar is really about that filtering. The Zohar says, what are all this filter? It's all filters on that dazzling light, which will not allow anything to withstand, because we would all die of immediately from overexposure, right? When the light is too strong, we need something that will slowly mediate the light to us, so it becomes life-giving. And yeah, and I think the story of Adam and Ish and Isha in the garden is that great. You know, it's our great Hebraic myth, right? That they are taken away. I'll just end with a beautiful description in the Idra, by the way, that describes the moment of separation, after the separation of the masculine and feminine. It describes that God is sitting on the Friday night, right? Friday evening of creation. Zeranpin, right, is sitting there, doing final tweaking on creation, right? He's like making the like bodiless spirits, right? And shadim, maybe
Of the demons,
demons, and suddenly she appears. Okay, she comes, the feminine, and we're talking about the divine feminine. That's just so amazing. She comes and she sits in front of the masculine aspect. He's never seen the feminine, right? She's never seen him. He's never seen her. They were back to back. And she just sits in front of him. And the description of the Zohar is that everything he was doing just falls out of his hands. It's so beautiful. Everything falls out of his hands because he's caught in the gaze between them. And then the Zohar adds that it says, who will throw their jacket between a lion and a lioness when they're making love, right? It's a statement from the Talmud, which is a very beautiful one. Like, who would even dare kind of come into the intensity of that moment? And they describe it as a incredible moment of harmony, which lasts for about 3.5 seconds. Because all moments of harmony last for just that fleeting time that they do. And then the work is to, you know, recalibrate, bring it together again, do the work. So,
Beautiful.
Thank you, my friends on the other side of the ocean. This was fun. I hope you enjoyed.
We did. So I just want to, just one thought. As you're talking, I was thinking of the custom for a bride to be veiled, and in very Orthodox circles, the veil is opaque. And I wonder whether the point is the unveiling, right? It's the moment of the unveiling. It's the face, right? It's the,
Yeah.
you don't have a face-to-face moment if
Yeah.
it's always face-to-face. Now, true, it could be the other gender that's veiled, and I'm not going to comment on why the woman needs to be veiled, but there's something about the unveiling that becomes very profound. And maybe that goes back to our, this year of COVID is a year of veiling, right? It's not necessarily an opaque veil where we can see through it, but we're seeing pixels. We're not seeing the real face. And there's a moment of this unveiling that we look forward to. Melila, I want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for drawing on these ancient, beautiful sources, often very elusive sources, and making them applicable, but not in a reductionist way, making them applicable, inviting us into this world rather than bending this world to our needs. Really deeply appreciate it. I look forward. I know that, when it's not COVID, you do come to these shores often. I look forward, hopefully the next time, to having you here in person. But I really want to thank you again. And I also just want to take a moment to thank 3 of my students who helped set up this year's lecture. Zachary Greenspan, Valerie Cervantes, and Eva Bibas, each in your own way, helped to promote this,
Thank you.
to deal with the tech. And I know that a number of my other students are here listening very attentively. And we're going to talk about the faces of God on Tuesday. So I look forward to
enjoy.
discussion.
Thank you. And it's really just an invitation to enjoy the riches of this tradition and, go play with them and do creative things with them. That's what it's about. Thank you very much. And good night from Jerusalem.
And enjoy the rest of your day here.
Bye. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Naftali.
My pleasure. Thank you, Joel.